From rejection to heartbreak, from fire to fate, their bond could no longer be denied, but claiming it would mean proving their love before the entire pack. The days after the ambush stretched taut as bowstrings. Patrols doubled, watchtowers manned through the night. Everywhere Aven walked, she felt the shift in the air. Not just the Northlanders pressing closer, but her own pack pressing in. Word of the fight on the ridge had spread before the blood had dried. Whispers wove themselves into the fabric of the camp. How Thorne had taken an arrow meant for her, how Aven's arrows had flown straight through the smoke, how they had moved in tandem as if born to it. "They fight like mates," she overheard at the well, two young she-wolves bent over their buckets. "Not a breath off one another." "Then maybe it's true," the other murmured. Maybe she really was meant for him all along. The words clung to Aven like burrs. She kept her head down, filled her bucket, and left without a word, though her ears burned. At home, her siblings were less subtle. "You should have seen him," her younger brother crowed one evening, acting out the battle in the middle of the kitchen with a broom for a spear. "He shoved you behind that stone like you weighed nothing. Then bam, arrow in his back." Her sister, never one to miss a jab, leaned against the table with a sly smile. "Sounds heroic. Sounds like a man proving himself to his mate." Heat shot into Aven's face. "He was doing his duty," she snapped. "Nothing more." Her sister only arched a brow. "If you say so." Their mother, busy at the hearth, didn't look up from her stirring. Children should not play with truths they don't understand. But her voice was soft, and when her eyes flicked to Aven's, they were full of knowing. Later, when the house had gone quiet, Mara sat beside her daughter by the dying fire. The silence stretched, heavy and intimate, until her mother spoke. "You've carried this bond like a wound for 2 years," she murmured. "Don't let gossip decide how you heal it." Aven swallowed hard. "And if it can't be healed?" "Then it can't. But don't pretend the hollow inside you isn't real." Her mother's hand brushed over hers, gentle. "And don't pretend that boy hasn't been bleeding for you since the day you left." Aven said nothing. She couldn't. The next dawn found her back on the southern line with Thorne. His bandage was fresh, his movement stiff but sure. They said little as they moved, the bond humming like a live wire between them. It was near midday when they stopped to rest in the shelter of an outcropping. Aven lowered herself to a stone, rolling her shoulders, while Thorne braced his hand against the rock and eased himself down opposite her. For a long time they said nothing. The forest was quiet, only the soft chatter of squirrels and the far-off croak of a raven. Finally, Aven broke the silence. Her voice came low, raw. "Do you know what it feels like to live with half your soul missing?" Thorne's gaze snapped to hers. "Yes," she shook her head, bitter. "No, you didn't feel it until I was gone, until I turned 18. But I felt it before, every day, every night. I carried the bond alone, and it hollowed me out." Her throat tightened. "I thought I'd never be whole again." Pain flickered across his face, sharp and unhidden. "Gods, Aven, I didn't know. If I had—" He stopped, exhaled, ran a hand through his hair. "No excuses. I should have seen. I should have listened." Her eyes burned, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "You shattered me, Thorne. With a handful of careless words, you made me believe I was nothing to you." He leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees, eyes fierce. "You were everything. You are everything. I was too blind to admit it, too proud to trust it, too much a coward to face what it meant. But there was never anyone else. Not before, not after, not ever." The bond surged between them, hot and electric. Aven's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to push it away, but the truth of it sang in her blood. Slowly, almost against her will, she leaned toward him. His eyes darkened, his breath mingling with hers, the space between them narrowing until it was no space at all. Then she stopped, her hand pressed to his chest, firm, halting the moment. His heart thundered beneath her palm. "No," she whispered. "Not yet. I can't, I won't let myself fall at your feet just because the bond pulls me there. Not until I know you're more than words and wounds taken for me." Thorne closed his eyes, exhaling slowly, as if mastering something fierce inside him. When he opened them again, there was no anger, only resolve. "Then I'll prove it," he said quietly. "Every day, every choice, however long it takes." Her chest ached with something she didn't want to name. She withdrew her hand, leaned back against the stone, and forced her voice steady. "Then we'll see." The bond thrummed between them, not sated, not denied, only waiting. The warning came at dusk, carried by a runner with blood on his face and mud on his boots. "Northlanders," he gasped, bent over, hands braced on his knees. "A full war band. They've set fire in the birch grove and they're pushing south." The Alpha's orders snapped through the camp like lightning. Armor, weapons, all able wolves to the northern line. Fires were doused, children sent to the shelters beneath the hall. The pack moved with the grim precision of people who had practiced this moment all their lives. Aven strung her bow, her fingers steady even as her pulse thundered. Across the yard, Thorne tightened the bracers on his forearms, the bandage at his shoulder hidden beneath fresh leather. His gaze found hers through the gathering chaos. No words, just a nod. They ran. The northern forest roared with smoke and flame when they reached it, the birches crackling as fire chewed through dry bark. Shadows moved within the blaze, men in rough furs, axes glinting, their shouts carrying above the din. "Hold the line!" Thorne's voice cut through, commanding, anchoring. Wolves rallied to him, their formation tightening. Aven loosed arrows into the smoke, each one finding its mark by instinct more than sight. She shifted, knocked, loosed again, the rhythm as natural as breath. Then the line broke. A group of Northlanders surged through a gap, axes swinging. Wolves met them head-on, the clash of steel and bone deafening. Aven turned, drew, dropped one with an arrow to the chest, but another charged through the smoke toward her, teeth bared in a feral snarl. She pivoted, knife flashing, but before the blade met flesh, Thorne was there, slamming into the attacker with the force of a storm. They went down in a tangle of limbs, Thorne's blade rising and falling until the Northlander stilled. "Aven!" he shouted, but in that instant another cry rose from the flank. Smoke parted, and she saw it. 3 wolves down, the Northlanders driving into the gap. She sprinted. Arrows hissed past her, one grazing her arm, but she didn't falter. She threw herself into the breach, loosing 2 shots in rapid succession. One Northlander fell, the second staggered, the third snarled, and came at her with a spear. She braced to meet him. And then Thorne was there again, back at hers, his blade intercepting the spear with a screech of iron. For a heartbeat, time slowed. They moved as one, her bow singing, his sword flashing, their bodies turning in the same rhythm, filling each other's blind spots without thought. The bond roared to life between them, not a whisper, not an ache, but a wildfire. It flooded Aven's veins, filled the hollow that had gnawed at her for 2 long years. She gasped, not from fear, but from the sheer rightness of it. When the last of the Northlanders broke and fled into the smoke, the field went still except for the groans of the wounded and the crackle of burning trees. Aven turned, her chest heaving. Thorne stood beside her, his blade dripping, his eyes locked on hers. The bond thrummed like a second heartbeat, undeniable. She didn't hesitate. Closing the space between them, she reached for him, her hands catching his face. His skin was hot with sweat and soot, his storm-gray eyes wide. She pressed her forehead to his, breath mingling, and whispered, "No more running, no more hollow." Then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce, desperate, the kind of kiss born of fire and battle and the knowledge that tomorrow wasn't promised. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her against him, and for the first time, the bond didn't ache, It sang. When they broke apart, both gasping, she saw the raw relief in his eyes. He whispered against her hair, "You were always mine, little bird. Always." Around them, the pack gathered, bloodied but alive, their gazes drawn to the pair standing in the center of the smoke and ruin. Not one voice rose in protest. They had seen what no one could deny. Thorne and Aven, mates, forged in fire, proven in battle. The last of the Northlanders fled into the smoke. The birch grove burned low, the flames crackling as they ate through bark and left the trees skeletal and blackened. The pack stood in the ruin, bloodied and breathing hard, every chest rising in unison with the same exhausted relief. Aven's lips still burned from Thorne's kiss. Her pulse thundered, her body aching from battle, but all she could feel was the bond, fierce, complete, whole at last. For 2 years it had hollowed her, and now it sang through every vein like fire. She turned to him. His sword hung loose in his hand, his storm-gray eyes locked on her as though he couldn't look anywhere else. There was soot across his cheek, blood seeping from his bandage, but he was alive, and hers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The kiss had said everything. Around them, wolves began to move, gathering the wounded, dousing the flames, carrying the dead with grim reverence. No one commented, not yet, but she felt the weight of eyes on them. The bond shone too brightly now to be hidden. Thorne finally lowered his sword, stepping closer until their shoulders brushed. His voice was low, meant for her alone. "You filled the hollow, little bird. I'll never let it go empty again." Her throat tightened. She didn't answer with words, not yet, but she didn't step away. When the last fires were smothered, they carried their fallen back to camp. One dead, and in a pack, even one was too many. The weight of loss pressed heavy on them all, even through the victory. The alpha walked among his pack as they gathered in the yard, his eyes steady, his voice solemn. "We bleed, but we stand. We burn, but we endure. And we do not endure alone." His gaze lingered on Aven and Thorne, together side by side, unflinching. A ripple went through the pack. Acceptance, recognition. No whispers this time, no mocking laughter. Only truth seen plain. Later, after the dead were laid out for mourning rites, Aven found herself at the edge of camp. The night air was sharp, the stars silver bright above the darkened forest. Thorne came to her quietly, his steps sure even with the bandage tight across his shoulder. "You don't regret it?" he asked, voice low, careful. The kiss. She turned to him, her breath visible in the chill. "No, not for a heartbeat." Her hand lifted, fingers brushing the line of his jaw. "I regret the years we lost. But not that." His eyes closed, relief shuddering through him. He caught her hand, pressing it to his lips. "Then let me spend the rest of my life making up for those years." Aven's chest ached, but not with the hollow anymore, with something fuller, fiercer. She leaned into him, resting her brow against his, their bond thrumming steady and strong. For the first time since she had fled into the night as a girl, she felt whole. The morning was brief but heavy. A bier of pine boughs, a cloak folded across a still chest, flames rising into the night while the pack lifted their voices in one long, keening howl. Grief bound them together as surely as blood. When the fire dimmed, silence fell. Not emptiness, but unity. The next evening, the alpha called the pack to the great hall. Candles burned low, their light casting long shadows across the wooden beams. Maps lay cleared from the table. This was not a council of war, but something older, heavier. Aven stood near the back, her family at her side. Thorne was across the room, his shoulders squared, his bandage clean but still visible beneath his tunic. Their eyes met and held, and the bond thrummed so strongly between them she felt it in her bones. The alpha's voice carried through the hall, steady and sure. "We have seen fire on our borders. We have seen blood spilled in our own ground. We have seen wolves stand and wolves fall, and we have seen what cannot be denied. His gaze shifted, pinning Aven and Thorne in place. The bond. A murmur rippled through the gathered wolves, but no protest rose. Too many had seen them fight as one, bleed as one, survive as one. The Alpha gestured. "Step forward." Aven's pulse raced, but her feet carried her before she could think. Thorne moved at the same time until they stood shoulder to shoulder in the center of the hall, every eye upon them. The Alpha's tone softened, but lost none of its weight. "Thorne, Aven, you carry the bond. The question is not if it exists, but if you will claim it." The hall fell silent. Thorne turned first, facing her fully storm-gray eyes blazing with something she had never seen in him before. Not restraint, not hesitation, but unshakable certainty. His voice dropped low, meant for her, but echoing enough for all to hear. "You were always mine, little bird. I was too blind to see it, too foolish to say it, but no less true. No other touched my heart, no other touched my soul, only you. If it takes a lifetime, I'll spend it proving I'm worthy to be the man the bond chose for you." The words cracked something open in her, and for once she didn't fight it. The hollow that had haunted her was gone, filled with the bond's steady fire. Her voice trembled, but it was strong enough to carry. "For 2 years I lived with half my soul missing. I thought the bond was only pain, only loss. But now I see it wasn't the bond that broke me. It was you. And you've begun to mend what you shattered." Her hand found his, fingers lacing. "So yes, I claim it. I claim you." The hall erupted, not with chaos, but with a rising chorus of voices, wolves pounding fists to tables, stamping feet to earth. Approval, recognition, joy. The Alpha lifted his hand, and the sound dimmed. His voice was solemn, but a smile tugged faintly at the corner of his mouth. "Then it is done. The pack bears witness. The bond is claimed." Thorne cupped her face, lowering his brow to hers, his voice rough with relief. No more hollow. Aven smiled through the tears she hadn't realized were falling. No more hollow. Their lips met again, not with the desperation of battle, but with the promise of every tomorrow to come. Around them, the pack howled, not mourning this time, but exultant, the sound rolling into the night like thunder. And for the first time since she was 16, Aven felt no ache, no doubt, no emptiness, only wholeness, only home. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching.